Carl was this mega superstar. And then he just disappeared.
You do not want to be in this chair. I cannot stress it enough.
I began working on this project in October 2021. So it's been almost a year, just over a year and a half that I've been working on it from start to finish. In the prelim phase, just getting the story down, understanding the key players, understanding the key issues and perspectives. We interviewed a lot of people, upwards 50, 60 maybe. It's a story with a lot of sensitivity around it. So we've always kind of gone in with a very small but nimble crew, just so it created that kind of safety for the subjects, that sense of comfort for the subjects. The Alexa Mini was the prime tool of choice. How many Carl Lentz sermons did I watch? Probably nearly 100, I would say.
Hillsong is a megachurch, and Carl Lentz is the celebrity pastor.
Carl is so charming.
People idolized him.
There is a sense that pastors can be hot.
He was so special.
It was cool.
How did you land the Carl Lentz interview for the doc?
We started this documentary without Carl, and we could have told it without Carl as well. He is an incredibly important part of the Hillsong story, but it was very, very important to us that we also balanced all the other perspectives as well. For a lot of people who are even within this, knowing that Carl is also in it is incredibly triggering for them as well. And their perspectives were not heard for so long, and I think for them and for us as we made this, it was a very delicate dance, trying to create that trust on all sides. Obviously talking with different congregants and the kind of level of impact. I mean, Hillsong would not be what it is in terms of its reach and scope and scale without the Carl Lentz aspect of it. He comes with his own personal trauma that he's experienced and feeling and still working through. I think what Hillsong was incredibly good at was the image and the publicity and the PR of how they presented the church. And it wasn't until, Carl's infidelity was discovered, it was the first chink in the armor that allowed this other story to start to be heard, these other perspectives and voices, not just in New York, but kind of all the way back to the students that were attending the college, and even further to the people that were part of the roots that kind of founded Hillsong to begin with.
Carl was fired by Hillsong leader Brian Houston, but there was something larger happening at this church.
People were putting things together. Brian's unraveling was bound to happen.
They were protecting something. What are they protecting?
It was important for us, for him to, it was not a platform. It was an opportunity for us to ask the questions that so many congregants are still wondering and continue to wonder about the church. It allowed a forum for a different perspective. Carl never, ever spoke once he left Hillsong. So being able to hear that side of things, hear how it went down, and also hear how it was for him once he's on the other side of the fence of that church, not on the inside, maybe experiencing the discrimination, the hurt, the pain of what a lot of the other congregants had been feeling for a long while.
I think Carl could cry on cue. They held the microphone and he would go.
On a personal level, did you feel like Carl was honest with you in completion when he was being interviewed?
That's a really tough question. It's, a lot of the criticism about Carl is how charming he is. Watching his sermons, it is undeniable. The level of talent, he was an incredible preacher, incredible performer. So there was certainly an element of just a kind of a heightened vigilance, I guess, in a way of just making sure that every time we talked about difficult things, we went to the places, even if he did not want to talk about them, creating an environment with why we're talking about them. And I would ask questions often, and Carl will tell you this himself, over and over again. People, as you know, when you work with celebrities, when you work with people who are media trained and things like that, they know how to answer things a certain way. As a documentarian, as a director, having worked with other celebrities before, my job is to break that down. My job is to humanize them. My job is to work through the stuff that you want to just spit out first and get to the stuff that lies beneath it. And for us with Carl, that took multiple interviews. And certainly with any project, I think, that works on subject matter that's as complex as this, there's always an element of what still don't we know?
I'm so nervous about how this is going to be portrayed, but I cannot control that. So God, grant me the serenity to accept the documentary things I cannot change.
I can imagine from his side of the fence walking into that room after not speaking for, at that point, 20 months or something like that, where to start to even talk about, in his case, 44 years of his life that led to this 10-year kind of reign that was so epic, and the just as epic fall that came after it. But the reality is that when the cameras are on and your two people are talking to one another, it's a very, very, very intense experience. He'd been in this environment where everybody knew him, everyone adored him. He had this cachet that was so huge and that disappeared in an instant for him. And obviously, for a very good reason, as we know, and the issues and all of these kind of things, that's not obviously diminishing that at any point, but I'm kind of more trying to contextualize like that for him, getting into an environment where you're about to perform again, where you're about to put on makeup, where you've got people going to sit down and you're about to talk about all of these things that have like absolutely flipped your life upside down. You can't underestimate the power of that specific moment. And I think for him, that moment of him sitting in that chair was not only a kind of flashback, the first flashback he had to his former life, but it's also the flash forward to like, what's he going to say in order to like start to walk back all of these things that he's done and been a part of that were really not great, And I think that's what that moment really signifies in the documentary.
The decisions that I made, the pain those caused, the betrayals involved, I did those things. Those are on me. I take responsibility for those. And the rest of my life, I'll be making amends where I can.
I really wanted to ask about bringing all of those other perspectives in and all the people who were in part of Hillsong at various iterations and who went to Hillsong College. What was the process of bringing those people to talk and to interview? Were they open? Were some of them closed and didn't want to talk about it? What was it like?
Great question. Really great question. I was fortunate to come into the project. This began with Vanity Fair reporting at the time of Carl's firing. Alex had done an incredible job of foraging some relationships within the church of people who were in various positions of leadership and influence and whose stories were incredibly powerful in putting together their original reporting, and through them become introduced to more voices. And the pre-production on this was 4 months long, and it took a lot of conversations. Like some people, day before were getting in the chair to, suddenly have cold feet. And I get it. Honestly, it's very, very hard. For years, anybody that speaks up against Hillsong or has an alternative narrative to the image that's presented have been really shut down and isolated. So there's not a precedent for like great things happening to people who speak out, and you're just constantly talking all day. And even now, we've done the documentary, you don't just walk into a room and shut the door on people. This is the process of filmmaking is collaborative in every sense. Like every single person in this documentary has helped make it. And therefore, until it goes on air and even after, it is very, very important that they're brought along as part of that journey, especially, in the instance where we're dealing with so much trauma.
Brian's pushing people to the limit.
Hillsong culture is loyalty to Hillsong.
I wanted to ask what your greatest hope for the docuseries and its impact is.
This project, I hope, creates a kind of transparency and an openness with which to talk about the religious systems within, the global community. And as I said at the beginning, it's not a takedown of religion in any sense. It's an ability to understand the good that's done, but also the lines that are crossed that are bad and how to look out for those, because we live in a culture where celebrity worship, personality worship is just, in every stage of not just religion. Hillsong ultimately is a worship of Jesus, of God. And I hear this over and over again in the interviews is like, that needs to look like God. It needs to act like God. And when you start to kind of measure it by those standards, you start to see something very different. I'm not a religious person myself. And I also don't see this as necessarily a straightforward story about religion. I think this is a story about our culture. This is a story about our time. This same system within church and idolization and, power structure and all these kind of things. Look to Hollywood, look to the finance industry, look to politics. This is a story that transcends all of those things. And we just happen to be telling one that happens to take place within a church.
This is a church we're talking about.